Imagine sitting in your classroom. Everything's normal until a sudden alarm begins to scream through the halls. Your teacher yells that this is not a drill, and the lights go off. At first you think it's just a lockdown. Maybe there's a shooter. Maybe it's just a drill gone wrong. But then you hear it. Footsteps, too slow, too heavy. And a voice on the intercom that doesn't belong to your principal. A voice that whispers, "Let me in." Tonight, I'm going to tell you one of the creepiest, true-like lockdown horror stories you'll ever hear. A story that proves sometimes you aren't hiding from something outside. You're hiding from something already inside. Hey everyone, I'm AJ and welcome to Beyond with Horror Stories. Let's start. It was supposed to be just another ordinary Tuesday at Riverside High School. The morning had been filled with the usual chaos. Students shuffling through lockers, teachers handing out assignments, and the distant sound of basketballs echoing in the gym. But just before noon, everything changed. A shrill alarm cut through the building, so piercing that my bones vibrated. At first we thought it was a drill. Schools have lockdown drills all the time. But the trembling voice of the principal over the intercom told us otherwise. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. All students and staff initiate lockdown procedures immediately. Lock your doors. Stay silent. Stay hidden. The room fell into stunned silence. My classmates looked at each other, eyes wide. And then chaos erupted. Chairs scraped across the floor. Desks were dragged toward the door to block it. Miss Carter, our history teacher, ordered us into the corner of the classroom. My heart pounded so loud. I was afraid whoever was outside could hear it. The classroom went dark as Miss Carter switched off the lights. The only glow came from the faint sunlight squeezing through the blinds. We crouched in silence, barely daring to breathe. Then came the sound. Footsteps, slow, heavy, not rushing like a threat with a weapon, but deliberate, like someone asterisk wanted asteriskers to hear. The steps echoed down the hallway, pausing now and then as if whoever it was listening. Searching. I pressed my hand against the cold tile floor, trying to ground myself. But my mind was racing. What if it was a shooter? What if someone had gotten into the school? But then something happened that made me realize this was no ordinary lockdown. From the hallway came a sound, low, guttural, almost like a growl. Not human. Everyone froze. One of my classmates, Jason, clamped his hand over his mouth to keep from screaming. The footsteps resumed, but now they scraped, like long nails dragging across the linoleum. And then a classroom door rattled. A handle twisted slowly, deliberately, though we had locked it. Miss Carter mouthed the word, "Don't move." The rattling stopped. And from the crack at the bottom of the door, a shadow appeared. Too thin, too tall to be human. It stretched across the floor like liquid darkness, pausing right outside our classroom. The intercom crackled again. But this time, it wasn't the principal's voice. It was a whisper. "Let me in." We stayed frozen in that corner for what felt like hours, though in reality, only a few minutes passed. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Every creak of the building felt like a gunshot in the silence. The shadow beneath the doors lingered, as though whoever or whatever stood outside was deciding what to do next. Then, it was gone. The footsteps moved away, fading down the corridor, but none of us relaxed. If anything, the fear got worse. Jason, who sat next to me, whispered so low I almost didn't hear him. "Bro, that wasn't human, da." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was locked, my heart hammering against my ribs. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from the end of the hallway. Something heavy had fallen or been thrown. The sound made a few of the younger students whimper. Miss Carter squeezed her eyes shut as though praying silently. And then, the intercom came alive again. Static. Followed by that same voice. Low, hollow, not belonging to anyone we knew. "Why are you hiding?" The words seemed to crawl into my ears, slipping under my skin. One girl, Megan, began to shake uncontrollably. Miss Carter wrapped an arm around her, whispering for her to stay calm. But then came the real horror. Across the room, the classroom phone rang. It shouldn't have been possible. The phone system had been cut during the lockdown, but the ringing echoed sharp and shrill, cutting through the tension. Miss Carter slowly crawled across the floor, lifted the receiver, and pressed it to her ear. Her face went pale. She didn't speak. She just listened for a long, dreadful moment. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "She's right here with us." We all froze. Whoever was on the other line had asked for Megan, the very girl trembling in the corner of the classroom. The phone clicked dead. Silence followed. Then, without warning, the lights flickered, just once. But in that split second of light, I saw something that made my blood freeze. At the far end of the classroom, inside the room, stood a figure, tall, thin, its face blurred like static, its long fingers stretched down to its knees. And though the lights died as quickly as they came, I knew what I had seen. We weren't just hiding from something outside the door. It was already inside. Jason grabbed my arm so tightly it hurt. His nails dug into my skin. "You saw it too, right? Tell me you saw it, bro, please." Before I could answer, a scream ripped through the silence. It was Megan. Her seat in the corner was empty. She was gone. And the only thing left where she had been sitting was her notebook, open to the last page. On it, written in jagged red letters, I found her. Miss Carter dropped Megan's notebook as though it had burned her. The red letters seemed to glow in the faint light slipping through the blinds. Jason whispered a prayer under his breath, rocking back and forth. No one wanted to speak. No one wanted to accept what had just happened. Megan had been right there, between us. And in a blink, she was gone. Suddenly, the classroom phone rang again. This time, no one moved to answer it. The shrill sound made every nerve in my body scream. After 5 agonizing rings, it went silent on its own. And then came the announcement over the intercom. "Student missing. Basement level. Helper. Basement." There was no basement in Riverside High. At least, not one we students were ever told about. Miss Carter's lips trembled. I think she knew something she wasn't supposed to. Jason looked at me, his eyes bloodshot. "Bro, they're trying to take us one by one. If we sit here, we're all finished." I wanted to argue, but deep inside I knew he was right. Sitting still hadn't saved Megan. Miss Carter motioned for us to stay quiet. Then, against her own fear, she crawled toward the classroom computer. A lockdown had triggered the CCTV feed on her screen. Normally, it only showed the front doors and hallways. But this time, there were more cameras. Dozens of feeds popped up, places I didn't even recognize. Narrow staircases, damp concrete walls, long tunnels with flickering bulbs, a basement. And in one of those feeds, we saw Megan. She was standing alone in a dimly lit hallway, her face blank, eyes staring ahead like she was sleepwalking. A dark shape loomed just behind her. Something tall, something bent. Its limbs too long, its head brushing the ceiling as it crawled behind her. The screen flickered, and the feed cut to static. The entire class gasped at once. Miss Carter shut the monitor down immediately, but her hands were shaking so violently she knocked the mouse to the floor. "We stay here. Nobody moves," she whispered harshly. But the intercom came alive again. "She doesn't want to be alone. Who's next?" The lights in the classroom flickered again. This time, it wasn't Megan who disappeared. It was Jason. One moment. His hand was still gripping my wrist so tightly that it hurt. The next moment, I was clutching at empty air. I gasped, looking around wildly. His backpack still sat on the floor, his phone buzzing faintly with a notification. But Jason was gone. And on the blackboard at the front of the class, words appeared, written in chalk that hadn't been there seconds before. "Who am I? Who's next?" The class broke down into sobs. A few students tried to scream, but Miss Carter slapped her hand over their mouths. Her face was pale as death. And then, from the hallway outside came a noise. Footsteps this time. Knocking. 3 slow knocks on the door, followed by silence. Then again, knock, knock, knock. This time a voice followed, but it wasn't the same deep whisper as before. It was Jason's voice. "Guys, it's me. Let me in." The sound of Jason's voice froze me where I crouched. It was soft, muffled through the door, but it was him. The same tone, the same desperate tremble. "Please," he whispered again. "It's me. I'm scared. Let me." My chest tightened. I wanted to believe it was him. I wanted to fling open the door, drag him back inside, and pretend none of this had ever happened. But something in my gut twisted, warning me it wasn't real. Miss Carter shook her head violently, holding a finger to her lips. Her eyes screamed, "Don't you dare." The knocking came again, this time faster, harder. The entire door rattled on its hinges. And then silence. A moment later, the classroom phone rang once more. I didn't want to hear it, but the shrill tone cut through the dark like knives. Miss Carter hesitated, then lifted the receiver. She barely breathed as she pressed it to her ear, her face drained of all color. "What?" she whispered. We leaned closer, straining to hear. Her hand began to tremble so badly she almost dropped the receiver. Finally, she whispered, They said a lockdown was never for a shooter." The class erupted in confusion. Miss Carter slammed the receiver down before the voice on the other end could say more. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "Why are we hiding if it's not a shooter?" Her lips pressed into a thin, pale line. She didn't want to answer, but the intercom did it for her. Static filled the room. Then, in a voice that sounded like a child's, sweet, trembling, broken, came the words, "You locked me in here." And I burned. The room went dead silent. Every hair on my body stood on end. Suddenly the air smelled faintly of smoke, acrid, bitter. And then I remembered. Years ago, before I'd even joined the Riverside High, there had been whispers about a tragedy. A fire in one of the older wings of the building. A student trapped during a lockdown drill. They never spoke about it officially, but the story floated through the town like smoke. I thought it was just a rumor. A ghost story. But now, the footsteps outside returned. Slow, dragging. This time, accompanied by the sound of something being dragged across the linoleum. Something heavy. The lights flickered again. And for just an instant, the entire classroom filled with smoke. In that brief glow, I saw her. A girl. No older than 12. Her skin charred and cracked, her hair clinging in burned clumps. Her eyes were hollow sockets, weeping black smoke. She stood in the middle of the classroom, staring directly at me. And then, darkness. When the light returned, she was gone. The blackboard had changed again. This time it said, "You left me. Now you stay." One by one, the students began vanishing. Not with screams, not with noise, just gone. Their belongings left behind, their shadows erased from the corner where they had sat. Miss Carter tried to hold on to one boy's arm, but her hand slipped through thin air. She fell to the floor, sobbing. A knocking returned to the door. Louder. Angrier. And then, crash. The window at the back of the classroom shattered inward. Shards of glass scattered across the floor as a freezing gust of wind rushed in. And through that broken window, crawling on elongated limbs, came the girl. The burned one. Her jaw stretched too wide as she hissed, "Locked down forever." The burned girl's body twisted unnaturally as she crawled through the shattered window, her limbs bending at angles no human joints should allow. Her nails screeched against the tiled floor as she pulled herself inside. Every student left in the room huddled together, too terrified to scream. Miss Carter stumbled backward, pressing herself against the wall, whispering prayers that melted into sobs. I couldn't move. My legs felt like they had turned to stone. The girl's empty sockets fixed on me. And then she spoke, not with her burned, broken mouth, but inside my head. "You locked me in here. You left me. Now you'll know what it's like to be forgotten." The lights flickered violently, plunging us into bursts of darkness and blinding brightness. Each flash showed fewer students in the room. First 5, then 3, then only Miss Carter and me. And then, only me. I spun wildly, searching for her. Miss Carter's bag lay on the floor, papers scattered, her glasses snapped in half. But she was gone. The intercom crackled once more. Lockdown complete. No survivors. I pressed my hands over my ears, shaking my head violently. No, I'm still here! I'm still here! The classroom door creaked open on its own. The hallway beyond was pitch black, like stepping into a void. And from that void, dozens of charred hands reached out, grasping at the frame. Children's hands. Burned. Broken. Beckoning. A girl turned her head toward me, her jaw stretching wide until it split at the sides. Smoke poured out of her mouth, filling the room with choking ash. Come with us, she whispered. Stay with us. I backed into the corner, coughing, tears streaming down my face. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Somehow still alive. Hands shaking, I pulled it out. A screen lit up, showing a single new notification. Lockdown alert, active, sheltered in place. The timestamp froze my blood. It was dated 10 years ago, the same day of the fire. The burned girl's hand shot forward, ice cold, gripping my wrist. My phone fell from my hand, clattering across the floor. The last thing I saw on the screen before the smoke swallowed me whole were my own reflectionless eyes in the black glass. And then darkness, silence. Only the faint echo of footsteps moving down the hall, searching for the next classroom. So, the next time you hear your school's lockdown alarm, ask yourself, is it really just a drill? Or are you locking the doors against something that's already inside? Because some lockdowns don't end, and some classrooms never let you leave. Until we meet again in the next chilling tale, keep your lights on, because shadows may be closer than you think. This is AJ, signing off. Sweet dreams. If you can. Stories that take you beyond into the darkness.